The Taming of Coyote, Chapter 9. Convincing Sonya to follow him was a real challenge. The coyote was very animated as he tried to bridge the language gap between them. In the end, his constant hopping and high-pitched barking finally paid off. She was following him. A half-hour later, they reached his intended destination. Before them, the small pack of coyotes relaxed in the wild tranquility. Pups and juveniles play-fought as the adults mostly rested. They would need to hunt soon, and would need to be at their peaks. So they supervised on the rocks and on the ground. Once Sonya and her guide became visible, the adults paused, tensed, set their ears erect, and prepared to stand. These coyotes were far more familiar with the humans than with Turn. As if to prove a point, the coyote with Sonya began to rub against her and nuzzle her. She was safe, friendly, and his friend. The other coyotes approached, trapping Sonya against a tree trunk. They cautiously sniffed at her, unsure of what to make of her. She was just as frightened of them. The juvenile coyote seemed insistent on making his point. Eventually, the others seemed fine with this. She was just one, after all. She was also a human pup, and female. Everyone knew that female humans didn't hunt, and female pups were virtually no threat at all, especially when alone. She was safe. Sonya let out a heavy sigh as the coyotes seemed to reject the notion of attack and return to their spots. She glanced down at her canine friend. He seemed rather pleased with himself. Perhaps, during all of that, he told them, in their own language, that she had done him an important service. Either way, she was grateful. "You're a good little fella," she said. "Do you think I should give you a name?" So many coyotes. It'll be hard to determine who to talk to. The expression on his face seemed to show that he didn't care one way or the other, so long as it pleased her. All he wanted was for her to keep lavishing him with all sorts of attention. Sonya studied him carefully before giving him a soft smile. "Ezra." He peered up at her. "I'll call you Ezra. It means aid. I think that about sums up our relationship, don't you think?" The coyote licked her hand. That was his only response before he bounded over to his family. He licked at one of the big females. Sonya figured perhaps that she must have been his mother. She forced a nervous smile and she slowly integrated herself into the pack. Much to her relief, they seemed generally disinterested in her. She found a soft place to sit, made herself comfortable, and watched. Her constant presence seemed to ease the tension from the other coyotes. Soon they were comfortable enough to close their ranks about her, and to include her amongst them. By the complete onset of nightfall, the females had herded their pups about her. Sonya found this behavior very confusing. To make it worse, the adult coyotes, Ezra included, simply left her. There she was, alone, in the dark, with a bunch of baby coyotes. It would make no sense to simply abandon them all. She could only figure that the coyotes had gone off to hunt. They went hunting and left her to babysit? Were they crazy? There seemed to be nothing to do other than to wait for them to return. So that was what she did. Even though it was dark, her eyes gradually adjusted. Some of the pups chewed on each other, and several of them romped and crawled all over Sonya's lap. She soon found herself constantly counting and herding the pups together. She was soon reduced to rolling on the ground and making goofy noises to keep their attentions on her. She was far more fun and interesting than wandering off on their own. It felt nice, actually. She felt like she belonged. Like this was so natural. She spent quite some time like this, engulfed in this activity, until finally the others returned from the hunt. The hunting was good. The coyotes returned with full bellies and a little extra. Ezra carried a rabbit, almost intact, over to Sonya. The belly had been ripped open, and parts of the entrails dangled from the opening. However, other than that, the rabbit seemed fine. The notion of eating raw meat, especially raw meat that had been dragged in the dirt and carried in an animal's mouth, seemed gross to a normal person. However, it had been hours since Sonia had eaten anything, and it wasn't even a lot. She started to really feel the pangs hitting her, despite her mental arguments. Even the sound of females vomiting to their pups didn't deter her hunger. She took hold of the rabbit with a torn-out belly, and she pat Ezra's head. Driven by some primitive nature within her, she boldly started to eat the raw and bloody innards. Ezra was quite proud of himself. He had brought that gift especially for her. It may not have been the most pleasant meal to her palate, but she seemed grateful nonetheless. He had done something good. After eating, Sonia began to feel tired. The coyotes were placid, but were still actively nocturnal. Still, such a bountiful meal brought along with it lazy moments. Sonia sat herself down, using her own arms as a pillow. Ezra busied himself with exploring the grounds around her, nuzzling her, and sniffing all about her. She found it rather annoying, for she was quite tired. Luckily, Ezra seemed to have satisfied whatever curiosity he was trying to appease, and he nestled himself beside her. He was a much more suitable pillow. He was warm, soft, and fuzzy. Sure, he smelled like a fart in a jar, but it was the stinky coyote or deal with the chill. She chose him. It couldn't be much worse than a night putting up with Uncle Homer's stinky feet. Sonia woke early the next morning. The birds twittered such loud and vibrant songs. The night chorus was long gone, and creatures of the daytime were coming alive once again. Her eyes fluttered open to see morning. Actually, it wasn't all she saw. She saw dew and felt cool on her face, but nowhere else. Much to her surprise, she found out why. The entire pack of coyotes, pups and all, had come together to sleep about her like a big, heavy fur blanket. They were warm and comfortable, and she found them to be a very heartwarming family. This was certainly a nice way to wake up, but it just couldn't last. She had to find the road. She had to find the wagons before they got too far ahead. So she wiggled out from under the pile of coyotes and got to her feet. The coyotes were none too keen about being disturbed, but were quick to find new comfortable positions and fall back to sleep. Once she was several feet away, Ezra galloped to Sonia's side. "No," she said. "You stay here with your family. You need to get some rest too. I have to get back to my family. Hopefully they'll go pretty easy on me for running off." Ezra whimpered in response. He continued to follow behind her. "I know they won't be easy on you, Ezra. My village hates coyotes." He ignored her warning and hopped in front of her. He began to urge her to follow. Sonia glanced back at the pack. She had an uneasy feeling about leaving and about allowing Ezra to come with her. Still, in the end, she had no choice, did she? She didn't know these woods. She would have to depend on Ezra and his generosity, his kindness, and hope that he would take her to the road. The night before, Sonia had really gotten herself into a pickle. She realized now just how far she had strayed. Her attempts to navigate had only made the matters worse, hadn't it? It took 15 minutes to get lost. With Ezra's sniffing and tracking, it took 2 hours to find the dirt road that she had left behind. "Ezra, you did it! You found the road!" She rushed over to him and hugged him tight about his bushy neck. She planted a big kiss right on his fuzzy cheek before running on ahead. This was the exact spot. Smoldered fires still smoked, and smells were still heavy. It must have been a good breakfast. That she missed. As for the men, they were gone. All hope wasn't lost, however. They likely only had a few hours' head start. So long as she didn't stop and the road did not branch, she could probably catch up to the wagons after nightfall. She turned back to Ezra. He was sniffing about the fires. A few crumbs of breakfast were there to lick up, if the birds didn't grab them first. Finding nothing else of interest, he simply lifted his leg and urinated on the black patch. "Ezra, you'll have to go back now." Go back to your family. If my family sees you, you'll be shot. I just couldn't bear for that to happen. You've been so good to me last night. Please, please, Ezra. You've more than repaid my kindness to you. Please go." Ezra let out a whimper. He sat down and gave her a stare that would make almost any heart melt. Sonia turned quickly. She just couldn't look at him. "Stay!" she ordered as she marched down the road, leaving him and his family in her past.